in the car, if someone's giving me instructions, if I cannot physically see the map, I request that they point. I do not say left. If they use the terminology left and right, it is a foreign language. And for anyone who says, just put your your fingers in the L, I'm so sorry, but they both look like L's to me. Like,
which L?
Exactly. I'm like, all right, guys, we have 2 L's now. Which one,
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Literacy Keys, the mother-daughter dynamic duo, the #1 podcast for mother-daughter relationships talking about dyslexia. Now, I'm not sure if we really are the #1, so always learn to investigate. Don't simply believe what you hear on the internet. But in all seriousness, welcome everyone.
Hi. Oh my gosh, so sorry. I am currently getting over a cold, so you have to excuse my voice, but no, so happy to be back.
There we go, right? That sexy drawl. We actually weren't able to record last week because Alex called up. It's like, Mom, I got a frog in my throat. This isn't going to work.
So we're on the tail end.
Yeah, there we go. Excellent. So one of the things we were talking about in episode, and we said, you know what? Frequently asked questions. These are questions that keep coming up over and over again. So there might be something to it, because one of the things that I've noticed is that the names change, but the elements in the story are really consistent. And a lot of people obviously they have questions about dyslexia, what's happening with my child, what's happening to me, and everything else. And so we would take at least 5 very common, frequently asked questions and just talk about it and give our perspectives.
Yeah, no, I think honestly, the amount of frequently asked questions that I see that are so relatable, I'm like, oh yeah, I have been there. I have done that. Or, you know what? That's new to me. So let me try to either avoid it or let me try to try it, Like there's the difference.
Absolutely. So we came up with a list of some questions that we see repeated over and over again. And, where we see these repeated, these are emails that come into us. These are also Reddit discussions in dyslexia threads. These are questions that come up continuously in Facebook groups on dyslexia or that parents have and so forth. So there is a commonality, and we kind of grouped them together. I thought it worth starting with what up until recently I was calling the 3 Ds, but in fact, I'm incorrect. Probably the 4 Ds is a better way of thinking about them. So we say dyslexia, and it has come to mean kind of this catch-all phrase, like an umbrella phrase for everything, but in fact, there are nuances. I want people to start thinking about different silos so that we can use the terms correctly. We have dyslexia, which I'm going to give you the simple version. You can go online and get a much more complex version. That's not what this podcast is about. It never has been, because I find there's too much edu-speak and not enough simple English, common speaking or discussions about what things are. So when I think of dyslexia, it's difficulty reading. And that's the way that I'm going to define it for right now. Like I said, go to IDA and you can find a paragraph, or we can
11 sentences that you need to break down. Oh my gosh, it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Right, exactly, for that. Then we have dysgraphia. Now, dysgraphia, I like to think of difficulty writing, whether it is holding the pencil, writing for long periods of time, and so forth. Then we have dyscalculia, which actually, when you look at it, it looks like Alex, how did you say it?
Dyscalculia?
Yeah, dyscalculia, right? It's
That's
dyscalculia. But
100% how it's pronounced in my mind and how it shall remain.
there we go. Exactly. Exactly. So the dys that no one can pronounce, and that is difficulty with math. And then we have dyspraxia, which is difficulty with kind of muscle motor coordination and so forth. Now, why is it important to differentiate? I think part of the reason is that we all need to be speaking in the same language. And the other thing is there are different parts of the brain. So reading happens in one part, math happens in another, motor coordination is in another part of the brain. But the D's, so to speak, are all brain related. So if you want to geek out and look at MRI scans and everything else, you can see which areas are affected and so forth. And it
Yeah, which area
really,
lights up. You're thinking,
yeah,
yeah, boom.
exactly. But really, for simplicity's sake, I think that they are different. Think of them differently because it is possible that one person only has one. It's possible that they have all four, right? And each one requires different remediation, different ways of handling it, and so forth. So, Alex, let's talk. Why don't you share of the four, which ones affected you more and which ones weren't an issue at all?
Okay, so for sure the dyslexia. I mean, that was like the hands down, like, the star on the tree for Christmas. That was like the biggest problem I
Right.
had. Definitely the characteristics of like the difficulty of reading, the difficulty of processing. Sorry.
Spelling.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say with next we have like dysgraphia. It was different because I always had very controlled handwriting. It was something that I used, like my handwriting was very slow, but it was very controlled. It was very like meticular. It almost looked like typing, but I did that purposely. So I wouldn't say that I had dysgraphia, which was like the difficulty. I mean, yes, occasionally you would have like the hand cramping, but that's also because I held my pencil in a very weird way. And I refused to hold it normally until I was probably in college. Um, then dyscalcula or dyscalculia is how you would pronounce it. I say I least relate to that. I always, for the most part, loved math. I thought it just came very naturally to me, and I was very like, shouldn't reading come this naturally to me as well? Like, why is it so hard? And I was like, okay, fine, then I'm just gonna be a STEM girly, even though like I am right now in my current career very far away from STEM. So I would say I least relate to that. And then this new word that came in. I remember we were talking about this the other day when you were explaining. I was like walking home on my way to work, doing my daily call with my mom, and you mentioned dyspraxia,
Mhm.
and I was like, what the heck is that? That was completely, that's new and a difficulty with coordination. And I have always been one of those kids who didn't like the playground because they couldn't catch a ball. And it was like I was so bad in gym class that I was probably one of the last people picked every single time to do the team. Like it was just like ridiculous. And I feel like the only time like people would like actually like want me on their team was because like I was such a talker. So I would just like talk to like, the gym teacher the whole time. I'd be like, let's go, class, like great job. And it was just because like I didn't want to make fun of myself and I didn't want to be like ridiculous where I knew like it was pathetic. I really could not catch a ball to save my life. I lacked complete coordination there, like complete. And like even nowadays when I go and I play tennis, just for fun, my friends say that. There's this sound on TikTok. It's very like if there's anyone from my generation listening, like the one where she was just a fairy.
Keep
Like she
going.
was just a fairy. That is literally how I would describe me playing tennis because, like, it's just like the melodic, like, boom, completely missing the ball. So after understanding what are the signs of dyspraxia, I realized that, well, I don't think I fall on the curve of, needing accommodations in my life. I do say it's something very relatable.
Interesting. Now, I'm going to contradict a little bit of what you said, not related to the dyspraxia, but related to the dysgraphia, because I actually think that you do, or, you showed signs of definite dysgraphia and so forth. And the way that you handled it was by overcompensating your handwriting and ensuring that it was always extremely legible. However, as a result of it being so precise and perfect, it would take you hours to write sentences. Right. And I never knew at that point that perhaps cursive might have been a way to get you to be able to write the letters in a more fluid way that you would then be able to read and so forth. So the point I think of this question, right, is simply that it's not just one thing. Yes, we say dyslexia and it's this catch-all term, but once you delve into it, there are different areas of the brain and there are different aspects and what to look for that. So really the frequently asked question, oh, it's dyslexia, it's all these things, we have to use the proper terminology for that. Anything else you want to add to, what are the 4Ds or what is dyslexia and so forth?
No, I think we've
Yeah.
discussed this at its finest. No, I really think it's important to understand the difference because at the end of the day, um, I think you nailed it where you said that like dysgraphia, dyscalculia, dyslexia, they're all treated differently. There are ways to get around it, and they're all different. So it's understanding which area you're, currently struggling in and targeting that.
Right. And for example, if since they're comorbid, since you do tend to see individuals that will have um, perhaps all four of them, then to be aware of it because we can't assume that you're going to be good at math just because you're not good at reading or vice versa or any combination thereof. Really look at each one individually. And if you do have dyscalculia, then a lot of times you need a much more tactile way of understanding math concepts. So, for example, when I was working with a student and they were trying to get through their multiplication tables, straight memorization just was not working. And what we ended up doing was working with something called Times Tale, which there's stories related to what is 7 times 7. So it's based on these characters and what they do. And so they're learning or they're remembering it in a different part of their brain to help move it into long-term memory. So that really is why it's important to understand the different elements. Cool. All right. So, this is a good one. Next question that is repeated over and over. Left from right. And this one, how many times when we were driving and I'd say, okay, make a left. No, the other left. So frequently, one of the things people will say is, does anyone else have difficulty remembering their left from their right? So I'm just going to hand this one to you, Alex.
Well, I just want to say in the car, if someone's giving me instructions, if I cannot physically see the map, I request that they point. I do not say left. If they use the terminology left and right, it is a foreign language. And for anyone who says, just put your your fingers in the L, I'm so sorry, but they both look like L's to me. Like,
Which
it
L?
works. Exactly. I'm like, all right, guys, we have two L's now. Which one? Or I'm like, okay, guys, I'm holding my hands the wrong way. Which L? It's really embarrassing. I remember one time I was um doing my driver's license test, and it was like, you're 16, you've had your permit for 6 months, and it's time to get your license. And I requested to the driver, and I was like, "Hi, I just want to ask, instead of saying left or right, do you mind pointing? I am dyslexic." And he was like, "Oh, no problem. We can try it." And he forgot to, and he said, "Make a left." And so I turned my indicator on, and he goes, "Oh no, honey, your other left." And I was so mortified. I was like, "Please don't take away points. Like, I really need my license." Not saying that out loud, thinking that in my head. Um, but there are so many times where small things like that had happened where I realized that the best thing to do is just say to people, "Can you just point?" Or, maybe I'm just going to look that up myself and use maps by myself. So, like, I see the, instructions, and I can see, like, the direction I need to go into. And it's something so frustrating because people are like, "Oh, it's right. It's left." And they are able to recognize the difference in like a second. And I'm here, and the only way nowadays, because I've sort of self-taught this, um that I can know the difference between left and right is, what hand would I naturally pick up a pencil with? And I think in my head, and I go and I do the movement, and I notice, like, it's like naturally, which one do you write with, like what hand, and you just like make the movement. Whatever feels more comfortable, that's my right. And so I say, "Okay, that's right." But that also takes like 15 seconds, 20 seconds for an act that's supposed to take 1 second. So I'm there like, "Hold on, putting pause on life here, like, no one move. Okay, I'm back on. Let's go."
For that. And in fact, one of the things that people do say is to teach dyslexics which hand do you write with for that, because then that becomes something that is automatic that they can relate to. So you were definitely right on with that
Yeah.
for that. Now, I will share a little story because I'm horrible with directions. I'm good with left and right, but I am horrible with directions. So we were driving, and well, I was driving and you and your sister were in the back of the car, and I wasn't quite sure how to get home. It's like, okay, can I take this route or is it the next one? And
I
you
have a
piped
question.
up.
Is this before GPS systems or
Yes,
after?
okay, I'm
Oh,
old
this is
enough that
no,
this.
no, no. Like, you need to like put like the story down that this is before GPS systems.
Yes, exactly. Where, we didn't have cell phones and, or the cell phones that we had were those flip tack, the StarTAC or whatever it was, but they weren't smartphones and you didn't have your entire life on your phone. And I remember I must have said it out loud or asked your sister since she was older, do I turn here or is the next one? And you piped up, no, mommy, it's the next one. And then you're going to turn and then, and then turn after that again at the big tree with the yellow, blah, blah, blah. And I realized it wasn't just one time that that happened, but you were amazing in knowing how to get somewhere. So it wasn't left and right, but it was like you had this whole map in your head. If we had already gone there and you knew exactly where we were situated and how to get home. And I'm still on, do I turn here or is it? So
Excuse
I
me.
share that story because there is a difference between left and right and being able to visualize maps or kind of positioning and where you are in the positioning, different parts of the brain, different elements, and not to be confused at all. And I experienced it firsthand. Anything else you would, some people say, well, I don't know, if you have like, look at your hands and if you have a birthmark or something on your hands, you could use that to figure it out. But I do like that. Which one do you write with? That is a well, it's an easier one. You don't have to worry about it
And
falling off.
maximum, if you're over 18 and you want to get a little tattoo on your hand, you can get the L and the R.
There you go. Right. But
Yeah, exactly.
highly recommend.
I have considered it, so don't feel embarrassed if you have considered it.
Right, exactly. Definitely something to think about for that. I'm just trying to think but it comes up so often, and really it has nothing to do with spatial processing, whereby you can see yourself kind of in a location or anything else. Another question that comes up frequently, and I think a lot of these questions are validating questions. So they're questions that people will put out there because they don't know if it's unique to just them, to being dyslexic. And a lot of this, it's questioning, it's inquiry. They're trying to really figure things out, and that's why I said, you know what? I think this is an episode because let's share what we know and everything else in order to help people validate some of their experiences, which ones are common across multiple people, and then which ones may be more unique to them. Another thing then that surfaces a lot is in spelling and having to Google everything. Does anyone else have problems and have to Google every other word before they're writing it for that? So take that one away, Alex.
I think out of everything we've just talked about, the lefts, the rights, the dysgraphia, dyscalculia, or dyscalculia, blah blah blah. This is the most relatable thing, and it's the most frustrating thing. So I used to do this on Google. I don't use Google so much anymore. I only use Google now if I'm trying to be discreet. I just go straight up to Siri and I say, "Hey Siri, how do you spell that?" Oh no, my Siri just came on. And I say, "How do you spell this word?" And I just say it. And it literally like it's trained and it goes, dyslexia. And it's just like it spells it out for me. But I think the most embarrassing, I think I've talked about this before, is that when you're trying to learn how to spell something and you're like typing into Google or you're typing into a Word document, and not even Google nor the Word document can actually understand what you're trying to say. And that's just like something that's like so frustrating. And then you have to like say, darn it, back, back, back. And then you're like, well, what are other letters that I can use and like jumble in or just like, fix the positioning? You're like, okay, type two. No, still can't guess it. Delete, 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 delete. Try again, try again. Um, yeah, but I use it all the time because especially when I'm writing something on like paper, I refuse to have to rewrite it. It has taken me so freaking long to write it out. I am going to triple check that everything is spelt right, even if that means taking longer, just so I don't have to do it again.
Right.
So
Yeah.
super relatable.
Yes. In fact, I still remember the days where I was in college and we typed all of our papers. And so you didn't necessarily have the backspace. We had these little, they were sheets of white, either white out, or you would have to put it in and then hit the type, the letter key over it to make it white. And then you would type over it. So I can definitely relate to, the frustration of having to do it. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is even if we've talked about it before, there are plenty of episodes and someone's not going to binge all of the episodes, although we do highly encourage you to binge watch all of our episodes. But share it again because these are frequently asked questions that we see over and over again, and people will find this by frequently asked questions for that. So the spelling, and so what can they do with the spelling? Um, Rules can be taught. Spelling can absolutely be improved. Morphology will help because you learn that pre then is pre, and it goes at the beginning of the word and it has a meaning before, and so forth. Similarly, I love suffix ed because I can't tell you how many times I see people spelling suffix ed just with the T. It's like, no, it has three sounds, but they're all spelt ed, right? Spelt is not spelt, it is spelled. By learning the suffixes, you learn those rules. And unfortunately, schools a lot of times don't teach the suffixes. They absolutely do not teach the rules because we've gotten to the point where grammar is a dirty word for that. And no one's talking about dry grammar, but we are talking about that there are things that will help you. I think schools feel like, oh, well, you just have spell check or, well, the kids will figure it out. And unfortunately, what we see is that no, these are things that when they are taught, it helps everyone for that. But enough of me on my soapbox with spelling and everything else. But I think that the message is no, that the message, it is very common to have multiple tabs open. So on the one hand, whether you're typing an email and you can't quite get the autocorrect close enough, then you open up another tab, or like you said, you go to your phone and you just ask, how do I spell it? And so forth. That is something that we see over and over again. And it is not unique to one individual. This, if anything, is really, really common for that. The one thing I will say is thank heavens we have technology.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's so true nowadays. I'm thinking, when was the last time that I didn't have to like go through and check my emails to the maximum? Because
Right.
we have technology, and I can nowadays throw it into ChatGPT and say, make sure that there are no grammar issues, just to make sure that there are none, and I'm not like making a fool of myself.
Right, right. Now, I am not proposing that we get rid of all technology and we go
Well,
back to the days, wait 1 second, where we had to look words up in the dictionary. Now, a dictionary, for anyone that doesn't know, is not online. It is probably about 5 inches thick. You would go to college or you would go into high school. Your parents would give you the two books, the dictionary and the thesaurus, and you had to look everything up. Now, what were you going to say?
I think it's just like, as like we advance as a society, like I do think it's important that we do stay like very, I'm going to use a word that I don't think exists, that we're very adaptable. Is that it? Is that a word?
Yeah,
Adaptable?
adaptable. Okay, that's good.
Okay.
ABLE,
Mhm.
right? That
Right.
that's a good suffix.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we are adaptable.
Where was I going with this? I think as
I don't
long as you
know.
know how to do it, you can use technology. That's like my final answer here. I think really, as long as you know how to look up a word in the dictionary, I think using a dictionary is just a waste of time. It is my opinion, 100%. Take that with a grain of salt. I am no diagnostician. I am just someone here with dyslexia.
There you
So
go.
my opinion, that's
Exactly.
it.
And there are only 20. You know what? It's pick your battles. That's
Yeah.
probably the best way to say pick your battles, figure out which one you're going to die on your sword for, which ones use technology to make your life a little easier. But you kind of segued into our next question in the sense of how do you go about getting a diagnosis? And this one was really interesting because in the beginning of our journey, I had absolutely no clue. I didn't know that a comprehensive evaluation was the way that the path that you wanted to pursue. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know who did it. It was a lot of research, and I think that first and foremost, a neuropsychologist is probably a very good starting point for who can provide a comprehensive evaluation. The second thing is what to ask for. You want to ask for a comprehensive evaluation. And this ties into the first question that we were talking about, the 4Ds, because under a comprehensive evaluation, they are going to ask questions around the different areas, and that will help to tease out areas of strengths and areas of weakness. If you only ask for, let's say, a dyslexia diagnosis or an evaluation, then it's possible that they're going to miss other elements. So, really, a comprehensive evaluation is probably the ideal place to start. And it's very different from a school evaluation for that. I don't want to get into too many details because a school evaluation is more like a triage to see if you qualify for services and is it impacting your education and whatnot. But comprehensive evaluation, look up neuropsychologist in your area. And the other thing would be to ensure ask what age range they specialize. Those were kind of the three things. Anything else that you want to add? People said, you know what, there were a lot of questions about I'm an adult. I'm 30 years old. Like, should I go for the evaluation? Should I get diagnosed? What are your thoughts on the question that comes up a
Yeah,
lot, should I
no,
bother getting diagnosed?
I think that's something very relatable. I know for myself that if I were to have gotten diagnosed, I would have had different remediation. Um, so I might have been better at certain things. Um, but I for sure would have used it as a crutch. So I'm happy for me that it ended up being a diagnosis when I was a teenager. I guess it also depends on what you're doing in your life. If you're in your 30s and you're hitting again, that proverbial brick wall at work and you're like, okay, well, I do need some kind of accommodations, or why is this so hard? Then yeah, absolutely. Get a diagnosis. Like, look it up. Also, the other thing is that, just thinking here, dyslexia is hereditary. It is genetic. So if you're worried that your kids are going to have it and you're struggling with it, I mean, this is just like, if you're having those like nervous tics or whatever, then why not? Absolutely. Go get a diagnosis, go see. Um, those are the two things that come into mind. Also, another thing, because I think there's three things. If you believe that at some time in your life you would like to go back and get an educate like a different kind of education, if you
Higher
higher level,
education.
if you know that you're going to have to take an exam for it, um maybe there would be like another like moment to say, hey, do I need a diagnosis? Like, understand, I mean, understand where would I fall on the spectrum, and then, have I had this problem before? um take the dyslexic test online, guys. That is what I did. And I think these are like the questions you just need to ask yourself. And I think you need to have like a very natural, honest dialogue. I mean, understand, evaluations are not just something that you do on Google. They're not just something that you say, like, put a post on, Reddit or Facebook saying, like, hi guys, looking for a diagnosis and under like $30. These are things that unfortunately cost a lot of money. And so I do think that it's the balance of, is this something I need? Then absolutely get a diagnosis versus, I've had this issue. I'm not necessarily like, I'm much less on the spectrum of dyslexia, but I just want to know what it's called. I don't know if that makes sense.
Right. I think so. I think you bring up a really valid point, a couple of valid points. So, one, the cost, and let's be realistic. In most states, it is not covered by insurance. New York State has passed law whereby dyslexia evaluations are now covered because I believe ADHD was covered, but dyslexia was not. They've changed the law. But that's in New York. It is not the same way in every state. So you have something that is several $1,000s and it's not covered by insurance. All right. So then that kind of begs the next question. All right. What am I going to do with the information? Now, on the one hand, you bring up the point that many times it is hereditary, it's genetic based. And so you will see in your family genealogy that it's there if you know what to look for. And that can be very helpful if when you have children, because you will be more tuned in that if you start seeing the signs, then perhaps to get an evaluation and more importantly, the remediation, because the remediation at a younger age then requires less remediation than if you wait later. I think the other thing, and this was what I had shared when someone had posted it, I said, what it can help is for the whole family. Because, for example, my level of patience when you would ask how to spell a word, then, prior to your diagnosis, I was beyond frustrated. And then I would preface every instance where I would spell the word with this Alexandrine Marie, this is simply not acceptable.
Yeah.
That you are in high school and you don't know how to spell this word. Well, all of that went away and it was like HIGH. Okay, hi. and so forth. So what it can do is then explain certain things. And that is something that can help everyone in the family. Now, this then ties into another question, which is, well, I have ADHD. So I think there can be the understanding of comorbidity. So these are instances that one issue either can mask another issue, or comorbidity means that they exist alongside each other. So what can happen is if a student or if an individual is diagnosed with ADHD, it's important to know whether they also have dyslexia or dyscalculia or any of the other Ds, because one can mask the other. And then you don't get the remediation. You don't get the understanding that you need in order to excel, in order to be able to understand a concept. So that kind of ties back into why it's worth doing the comprehensive evaluation, if indeed you are going to do it for that. So it's like a bowl of spaghetti. It's all interwoven, interrelated, tangled up. And as soon as you start pulling one thread and to untangle it, then there's all this other stuff that
Yeah.
happens.
And I really think it's going down to getting a diagnosis is something so personal, especially when it's something that you're getting later in life that you're not getting when you're, 5 years old. That it's very much case by case. What is right for you? What is right for your family? It's very personal. It's very individual, and it's very much you. I mean, it's your choice. You do whatever you think is right. There is no right or wrong answer there.
Right, absolutely. And I think that is, I will reiterate it too. There is no right or wrong answer in the sense of what is right for you as an individual, what is right for you as a family. It's just more information and then allowing you to leverage. The way that I view the knowledge is it allows you to leverage your strengths. So in the end, that's something that all of us are doing for that. It's a lot easier to do something when you leverage your strengths rather than simply take and try to push through your weaknesses. Let's face it, I hate bookkeeping, so if I don't have to do it, I'd rather not do it.
Well, I feel like that's a whole other conversation about you know, entrepreneurship, and that people that I'm hiring are going to be better at that than what I can bring to the table. You know what I mean? And it's just like surrounding yourself. You never want to be the best person in the room, but that's a little off topic.
Well, it is and it isn't, because obviously on every episode, we always like to end on a positive. And one of the things we see with dyslexia and some of or the 4D, shall we say, um, I see parents worrying and asking questions about the future for their child. And I think that this ties into the strengths that we do see with dyslexics. They are fabulous problem solvers. Why? Because they've had to navigate that for their entire life. So a lot of them, I think 40% of US entrepreneurs are dyslexic. Those are some of the statistics that I have seen. If you look at architects and engineers, then they are disproportionately dyslexic. Doesn't mean that every architect is dyslexic,
No,
but
absolutely.
there absolutely are careers that leverage strengths and just allow people to excel. And that's it. And that's maybe where the more you understand your strengths and your weaknesses, then you can focus on the strengths, right, for that in life. And then hopefully hire people that, or surround yourself with people that leverage your
Hmm.
weaknesses. You know, we truly are better all together. We
Yeah.
are.
And I think the biggest piece I want people to stick with is that just because you're dyslexic does not mean you cannot accomplish what you set your mind to. I mean, that is the basics, the fundamentals. If you need to take anything away from this, um, questions and answers, this Q&A, yeah, just because you're dyslexic does not mean you can't do things. And it does not mean you're not smart. It does not mean you're lazy. It does not mean anything. It just means that your brain processes information differently. Um, but the beauty about processing information differently since you were born, in my opinion, is that you never understood what's the correct way. So there is no correct way in your mind, and you improvise and you come up with other strategies and you come up with, you use your imagination a little bit more. And I think that is a skill that can take you very far in life.
Absolutely. So, with that, I think we are going to wrap it up with at least 5 frequently asked questions about dyslexia. So, with that, thank you again to all the listeners and the viewers, and we will see you. Bye for now.
Bye bye.